Hi there, and welcome back to Homeschool Heretic. My name is Rita, and today I want to talk about one aspect of purity culture: modesty. As I mentioned in my first video, it was homeschooling that led my family to a really conservative evangelical church, and it was homeschooling that kind of brought purity culture into my life. And I've been thinking specifically about modesty lately because a couple of weeks ago I went to the sauna for the first time since the pandemic began. And when you go to the sauna in Germany, you take off all your clothes. This made me remember the very first time that I went to a sauna, which was a little over 7 years ago. I had been with my partner for less than a year. He's German and he really enjoys going to the sauna, so he wanted to introduce me to it. And I liked it. I mean, it was really relaxing, it was nice, but I broke down into tears. I mean, I was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and I could not stop. And that was because of the messages I had gotten about modesty and about my female body at church and from books and speakers and just from all sides. I was told as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, that men and women are just intrinsically different. You know, men have these characteristics because they are men. Women have these characteristics because they are women. One characteristic that I was told men have is being visual, meaning that they are turned on by the things that they see. And I also learned that men have this incredibly strong sex drive, which is really, really difficult to control. So you shouldn't expect a man to control himself. Like, men are going to go as far as women let them go, meaning that it is women's responsibility to, make sure nothing inappropriate happens. Women are the gatekeepers of sexuality. And that gatekeeping kind of started with what we as women wore. There's a Bible verse in Matthew 5 where Jesus says, if you look at a woman with lust, you have already committed adultery with her in your heart. We took that very, very literally. And I knew that if someone committed just one sin, that alone was enough to condemn them to hell for all eternity. So it was really important that I make sure that men, when they saw me, wouldn't be led down that road to adultery in their hearts. And then there's another verse in 1 Corinthians 8 or 9 where Paul is talking about he's talking specifically about if it's okay or not to eat meat or food that's been sacrificed to idols. And what he ends up saying is, it's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with doing that. But some people, some Christians, might think it's wrong. Maybe they're not as strong in their faith, or they don't have as much understanding as he does. And if they see him doing something, eating this food, that they think is wrong, this could damage their faith and be cause them to stumble. So he wraps this up by saying, if meat causes my brother to stumble, then I will never eat meat. And we applied this concept to issues of modesty. It was so important not to do anything that might cause your brothers in Christ to stumble. Even maybe we could even grant that maybe it's not inherently sinful to wear a certain piece of clothing, but because of this danger to other people around us, we absolutely should not do it. And it wasn't only about what you wore. It was also about how you moved, perhaps even like the way you talked or your facial expressions. I mean, like if there was anything about you that might entice a man in an impure direction, that was a big problem. And one thing I remember really specifically is I was walking one day somewhere with a couple of other girls from church, and I was already in my late teens or even early 20s at this point. And we can call the girls Mary and Elizabeth. So Elizabeth was walking ahead of us, and Mary at one point pointed to Elizabeth's hips as she walked in front of us and said, "Look at that." Like, so this is a very admiring way. Look at how still her hips are. Like, she's walking fast, but she's not like swaying her hips all over the place like some women do. And she pointed this out as an example of being really godly. And this stuck with me. I mean, over the years, over the decades, I would be walking and this would come back to my mind, and I would see Elizabeth's little hips ahead of me just like being quite stationary as she walked fast. And I would remember I need to be careful. I need to watch the way I move. And so this resulted in me being so stiff in my body. Another memory that stuck with me, although I wish it hadn't, is from church. The pastor one day was giving his sermon, and he was addressing the men, the fathers in the congregation, and talking about how they were responsible for their daughters and responsible for their daughters dressing appropriately. And I remember the pastor looking out at the congregation, getting this little smirk on his face and saying, "Come on, dads, you know what tweaks you." Back then, I couldn't even articulate what felt really gross about that, why this made me feel so gross, but it did. And of course, I can understand it now because the pastor was basically saying, and this is my paraphrase, this is my understanding of what he was saying, that, hey, come on, dads, take a look at your daughter's body, whether she's a teenager, a preteen, whatever, take a good look at her body. Take a good look at what she's wearing and consider if this turns you on or not. And make her change if it does. I mean, it's just so gross. And so much of these teachings really do make women into objects instead of people. There wasn't any need for my father to check me out and decide if what I was wearing was okay or not. You know, I doubt that he would have done that anyway, but I took all of this so seriously that I very much policed myself. I've got a couple of pictures that show the type of clothes that I wore when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. Like, I'm sure that I was a size small, but my t-shirts would be large or extra large. And I mean, it would just be this really baggy clothing. That changed when I got to college. There, I made some friends who took me shopping and helped me buy some clothes that were more like what everybody else wore. But I think there was some stuff that I didn't buy. And these were conservative Christian friends, by the way. They just weren't as conservative as I was. But even then, there were some things they suggested for me. And I thought to myself, oh no, I couldn't wear that because that's not modest enough. And I wasn't confident enough to tell them that was the issue. I also didn't want to criticize their sense of modesty, but I just thought, no, I can't wear that. These messages about modesty, and of course, this is truly only one small aspect of purity culture. I mean, there's so much more there, and there's so much that is so toxic. Like, the modesty is really just one little part of it, but that little part had such a huge effect on me. I truly felt that my body was dangerous. I thought it would be better and safer if my body were not here. And I mean, if my body were not here on the planet Earth. I wasn't aware of this. It was so deep, it was so foundational to the way I felt that it just seemed normal. And it wasn't until I was on my way out of Christianity that I even began to be aware that I had this attitude and this belief. But I totally did, and this caused me so much discomfort and so much distress over the years because I was trying to do something that I couldn't actually do. I couldn't just make myself disappear, but I was trying. And I was trying, I think, to be small. I was already very pale anyway, but I was trying to be small. I was trying to be quiet. And when I went to church, for example, as a teen and also in my early 20s, I was not going many places. I would go to church. I would go to the doctor. Maybe sometimes go out with my family grocery shopping, and there wasn't really much more than that. But when I went out, I was small, I was quiet, and I was most of the time looking down and not making eye contact. But even doing all of those things, I was still there. I couldn't do the thing that I really felt like I needed to do, which was not be there. Once I started to be aware that this was my way of being in the world, it really bothered me. I thought this cannot be good or healthy. But it took a long time to change it. And I'm not sure if I've completely changed it yet. I'm sure that I still have a ways to go. It probably will be a lifelong process. But I remember one of the things I did relatively early on in my deconstruction journey, I was not a believer at this point, and I dyed my hair bright pink. And later on, I dyed it blue. This helped a lot because I had always tried to be as invisible as possible. And by making that choice, it was me. I was the one who, got my hair dyed, made that decision. And by doing that, I was really inviting the world to look at me and notice me. And at the beginning, with that bright hair, I felt like I was doing something forbidden by almost asking the world to notice me. It just felt so wrong. And I kind of, snuck out the door, and I was kind of maybe slinking down the street looking really guilty. But after a few weeks, or maybe after a few months, it was normal. And going through that process, specifically with the hair, helped me get to the point of feeling okay with physically being here on the planet, with walking down the sidewalk, recognizing I take up space, and this is fine. This is my space. This is absolutely fine. And people are welcome to look at me. I don't have anything to be ashamed of. There's nothing wrong with me and my body. I also experimented with wearing more revealing clothes and, kind of had this experience over and over again of wearing something more low cut or, a shorter skirt, whatever, something snug, and seeing that truly nothing bad happens. It took a long time to get over that thing of being so incredibly stiff and not moving my hips. I got a video of a sensuous dance workout for women that was based on belly dancing, where the instructor took you step by step through these different moves and really broke them down, really explained them, and showed really slowly, what she was doing and how. So I paid a lot of attention to that, and then I paid a lot of attention to my body as I was just going about my day. So, for example, I would really consciously think, okay, so I'm walking up the stairs, and when I raise my right foot, my right hip also moves up. Okay, I can feel my hip moving here. And now I'm raising my left leg, and I can feel the left hip moving. That's where my hips are. This is how I can move them. it took a really long time and it took a lot of work. So when my partner and I went to the sauna a few weeks ago, it was good to see that it's no longer a big deal for me. Like it was just a normal thing. I went, took off my clothes. I enjoyed it. I had a really relaxing day. I was there as a person, not as an object. It ended up being relatively crowded before we left. And I mean, could be that one of the men there perhaps did kind of look at my body. But even if, he's not going to hell.